Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I have a fun show today because I think most of you watching are familiar with the movie that's in the theaters these days. And you know how fantastic it is, Kristen, to say the movie in the theaters is about a Catholic woman, because with all
I
the
know.
garbage out there,
Few and
it's
far between.
right. So I think many of you watching have already seen the Mother Cabrini movie. I have not. I'm going soon. But Kristen Van Uden Theriault, did I do it right?
You got it.
She's a newlywed. I've had her on before, and I only had to do the Kristen Van Uden part.
That's
Um,
right. Adding one more impronounceable name for you.
Newlyweds are awesome to work with, but she is the editor over at Sophia Institute, and she's here to talk about 3 books. Really, I wanted to talk about 1 or 2, but there's a third one for children, and we're talking about all that have to do with Mother Cabrini. I want to read them. The first one's a Mother Cabrini companion, and it says the world is too small. Wait, I got them messed up. The companion has one title, and then the world is too small as her
This is
biography.
separate. Yep.
I'm going to turn it over to you, Kristen, and you
Sure.
tell us. And then we got the kids' book too.
Okay, that's what I'm here for. Well, thanks for having me. This is really a providential collaboration that we are blessed to work on with Angel Studios. So this book, I was really lucky to be the editor of Mother Cabrini's own writings for this companion. So I always love to read the saints in their own words whenever possible, and really with any historical figure that I'm interested in, I just think that's obviously the best way to get to know them in the most intimate way possible. And Mother Cabrini's letters are so interesting because she, of course, after the movie ends, which covers her time in New York, she went on to establish missions in all corners of the globe. And her sisters, after her death, actually did make it to China, which was her original intended destination before the Pope famously told her not to the east, but to the west. And she ended up going to New York instead. And so she really had this global impact. And so when she was traveling, she would write these very encouraging letters home to her sisters at the convent, where she would still be acting as their spiritual mother and providing spiritual direction and just, of course, tales from her travels as well, and giving them the inspiration they needed to continue their missionary vocation wherever they may be stationed. And so reading through these, I selected thematically. It's a weekly devotional, so basically it's meant as a companion not only to the film, but also for the year. So this is something that I envision readers will take with them throughout the year. So it's not something you have to read in one sitting. I would envision people reading it at adoration week by week, maybe on Sunday after Mass. And in that spirit, we've included some journaling pages at the end of each week so that you can really make these meditations from Mother your own and incorporate them into your own life. And so she talks on themes such as humility, of course, the virtues, lots on missionary zeal and the missionary vocation. And also, interestingly, some of my favorites are her thoughts on the beauty of God's creation from what she saw on her travels. So, in one, for example, she discusses the birds that were following their boats at one point and how she envisioned that those represented all of the hundreds of souls and thousands of souls that they would save on their missions. So, she just had this very beautiful imagination, and of course her mind was always set on God, so it's a great lens to view her soul through. The second book
No,
is
no, no. Before you go to the second book, you got me
okay.
thinking about it, and you may have already just answered it. But my first question to you is, do you remember like reading and being like a certain day and something you read that you're editing like touched you that day? Like, oh my gosh, this is, were there any things that like just really changed you?
Yes, I mean almost all of them at
Oh,
some point.
okay, yeah.
There was almost every day there was one of those moments, but I think let me pull up her meditations on the ocean, which I thought were really memorable because, again, as I mentioned, she always had God in mind. And so whenever she was just witnessing sort of run-of-the-mill things, she would view it through this more spiritual lens. So here are a couple quotes. Here we go. She says, "How many beautiful thoughts the calmness of the sea suggests. We see in it the happiness of a soul that lives in the tranquility of the grace of God. In such a fortunate soul, all is calm, peace undisturbed. It has the capacity of raising itself to the sublimity of the divine mysteries. This gives us a vision of the immensity of the power of God, who commands this endless sea, which could rise in whirling billows, while on the contrary, it remains calm and tranquil." So just things like this, like I personally love the ocean and love traveling and find that I have many more of these thoughts when I am able to just sit and
Yeah.
spend time in nature. And today, when we're so distracted by our phones and by a million notifications, like these moments become fewer and further between. So that just capacity she had to slow down and to just give gratitude for the God's creation, and to also liken the state of the sea to the state of the internal soul, I thought was just really kind of new to me. It's in the vein of capital R romanticism, and that nature
Mhm.
reflects the inner soul, and et cetera, and vice versa. But it's something that I think has been heavily lost today, which was a good reminder to kind of incorporate that way of thinking back into my own life.
Well, so I was never in the Navy, but part of my job at the Fleet Impoundment Support Center years ago was to
Mhm.
ride Navy ships home, which was like an
Wow,
awesome experience,
cool.
right? So they'd fly me out to Portugal or Spain to pick up a ship that had been deployed for 6, 8, 9 months. And then I would ride the ship home for 2 weeks. Of course, they're all wearing uniforms. I get to wear my civvies. And,
Yeah.
so whenever they see me, they're like, it's a sign of home. We're going
Yeah.
home. And then I would teach them classes like, how not to do a change of command ceremony at the door. And there were some dads who became dads while they were,
Oh,
so their wives are
right.
pregnant when they left and they come
Oh,
back. And how do
that's
I
so
hold my
sweet.
3-month-old baby? Right. Anyway, so I teach
Right.
these classes and it was so much fun. But then I'd go at night on this giant ship, a Navy vessel. And a
Mhm.
lot of times you're out there by yourself. Most of the guys just go to their
Mhm.
racks and they've been working all day.
Right.
And so, like you just said, I saw the immensity. And when you're out in the middle of the ocean, the Mediterranean or what was Atlantic, yeah, it seems like because there's no smog, the stars are so much closer to you.
Yes.
And everything you were just reading was like the awe of just looking and thinking on every star and how God created each star and how it's possible for my husband to be looking at one of the same
Mhm.
stars, even though
Yeah.
he's thousands of miles away. And then, like you said, the ocean. I mean, even though you hear the ship the
Mhm.
ship's riding in the waves, it's just so much more
So
quiet.
beautiful.
Anyway, you do feel God in those moments.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, so when you were reading that, I'm thinking, I can only imagine.
Yeah,
Well,
and I wonder too if, because one of the really interesting parts of these letters was that Mother Cabrini was always seeking conversions, even among the fellow passengers of the steamship. And so I wonder if that sort of, this liminal realm set apart from the day-to-day quotidian existence helped her to bring the immediacy of the existence of God to these people and at least plant the
it
seeds.
had to. It
Mhm.
had to,
Yeah,
because if the awe was hitting me and it was hitting her, it had to be hitting them. And
right.
hopefully she was able to, I mean, she's a saint. So,
Exactly.
so she
She did
probably had a
have
really good gift,
success with
but
this.
how
And
old was
in
she?
another passage, she describes actually the ship moving through a field of icebergs. And of course, this is
Ooh.
pre-Titanic ocean liner travel, so that disaster had not yet happened. This is about the turn of the 20th century. And she remembers being very afraid, and all of her sisters were afraid who were traveling with her. So she had to help them through this and provide some sort of consolation. And she just tells them to trust in God, and that's whatever happened whenever there was a storm that would come up, this was her message. And even though she herself was afraid, she just had this deep trust in God, and she just wrote at the end of that ordeal that God had delivered them from this potential disaster. So it was not always without peril, but through all of this, again, she just sees it through these extreme spiritual eyes that are actually the reality of what's going on.
Do you know about how old she was during these things? I don't
She
even know how old she
she
was when she
died, I
died.
think, in her 60s, so I mean, she was probably
Long life
30s,
then.
40s throughout the majority of her travels before she became too ill to travel, because she was sickly her whole life. And actually, this is why she was denied entry into the convent of her choice initially in Italy. And so then she went on, of course, to found her own order, the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, which is another one of those beautiful paradoxes where someone with health issues was able to have this very global and active ministry beyond the contemplative life.
I forgot to ask you, did you see the movie yet?
I did, yes. I got to pre-screen it, so
Was
to
it
help
before
write
the
this book, of
book was
course.
done?
And so I'm definitely going to go see it on the big screen though, because it was just so visually arresting and appealing that I definitely have to experience it in a real theater.
So how did you tie the book to the movie? Like, what's the interplay that it inspired in you?
Yeah, so the book basically picks up where the movie left off. So the movie really focuses in on her time in New York City and in developing those missions and especially orphanages there, ministering to the poor and marginalized Italian immigrant community. And this was really one of her first forays into her missionary work. And from there, she went on to found dozens of other missions. So within the US, there's also famously one in Chicago, where there's currently a shrine in addition to the shrine in New York City, and then also around Denver. And it's very interesting to read her letters about Denver, especially because it was so different from New York City, from the hustle and bustle of both New York and Chicago to this really
Right.
remote outpost at that point that was mostly transitory workers who needed the resurgence of the faith in that community because they didn't have a permanent priest, they didn't really have a permanent Catholic community at all. So she was, the needs were quite different, and she was able to adapt to the needs of each of the communities that she served, which was really beautiful. And then from there, of course, she had many others in international spaces. So Nicaragua, for example, she does a lot of travel in Central America
A
and even
lot of
back to
life.
Europe.
It's a
And
lot of
so
life for a sickly woman,
I know,
you know?
exactly. So this, I think, provides a really helpful context, and I found myself at the end of the film wondering, okay, what does she do next? Because she's clearly not done, and
Yeah.
um,
So
it
this
helps to,
companion then, so the companion you said it's just kind of like a devotional, kind of like a page where I
yes,
can write in it as well and just
yes,
kind of, but I don't have, it's not one of those where you have to do it
you don't
every
have
day and it's a
to. No, no, it's
365.
not.
It's
It's very unstructured
bite-sized pieces when
way
you
where
need
it's
it.
just freestyle writing instead of prompts. And I found it very interesting to read through her letters chronologically, but of course, in doing that, there is a lot of thematic material that kind of gets lost because she'll talk about missionary zeal on one page, and then the next page it's recounting what they had for breakfast that day. And then,
Mhm.
you have to slog through a lot of the day-to-day stuff in order to get these nuggets. So the purpose of this
Yeah,
book was to pull all of these nuggets and organize them in such a way that you can really get a sense of her true thoughts on specific topics.
nice. Well, so you said there's also The World is Too Small. That's her biography,
Yes, so this
so
is Mother Cabrini was canonized in 1946, and this biography was published around that time. So this is something that was very contemporary to the buzz about her and is very comprehensive. So for those who are looking for a much more detailed account of her life with all of the receipts, so to speak, and all of the details, then this is definitely the book to delve into. And it's quite interesting that she died in 1917 and then was canonized in the 40s. So it was really not that long of a period of time in between. And when you speak
wow.
to
She was
people,
canonized 30 years after she was born.
pretty much, or after she died, yes.
Oh, wait. Oh, she died in
Yes,
1917.
sorry, I might have
Uh,
misspoke. She died in 1917. So
maybe
usually
you said
you
it
have
right and
some
I didn't hear
saints,
it right. Okay.
you have
Yeah.
some saints that take centuries for even the
I
beatification process
know.
to begin. So this was in the grand scheme of things relatively quick. And
Well, she
I
died during when Our Lady of Fatima was appearing.
Yes,
World
that's
War
right.
One is happening, and they're like, if the world doesn't change, there's going to be another war, and they're all thinking, how can it be
Yep,
bigger than this? And then
yep,
here she is getting canonized at the end of the Second World War. It
exactly.
just
I
seems
know,
like,
very connected, and she died in that year with the dawn of communism, and then comes back at this moment right after the end of the World War, where we're clearly in need of her intercession. And in talking to people who were alive, at least at the time of her canonization, there was quite a strong devotion to her among all swaths of American life. So my grandparents, for example, both talk about their families having really strong devotions to Mother Cabrini, which I hadn't really known about before. But if you imagine, like, their parents would have been almost contemporaries of hers, and she made such an impact in such a short period of time in this country. And then, as we were saying before, as the first American citizen to be canonized, that she was just very relatable to a lot of people.
so did you start praying to her more often as you
I
started
have
writing?
now, but it was not this again is something I'm kind of embarrassed is that I didn't know a lot about Mother Cabrini before this project. So
Mhm.
I would even get her confused sometimes with Elizabeth Ann Seton and
You and I were talking about that before
others
we went on the air, right?
because they have such similar vocations and
Yeah.
of course involvement in education. And yes, she was someone who just kind of had this peripheral existence in my pantheon of saints, and I didn't know many details about her, but this project has definitely brought her more front and center in my life, and hopefully this will be a lifelong devotion for me now.
I don't want to put you on the spot because I know you don't know everything, but do you happen to know what she's the patron saint of?
Oh man, I think it's
We can
gotta
look it up. I didn't know. I didn't
it's
know if
gotta
maybe
be
everything you had to
something to
do.
do with education or obviously
Oh, that's Mother Elizabeth
Mary.
Ann Seton. Well, those of you viewers, you look it up because she's the first North American saint here. So that's just so. I think that's why there's so many people in America that really know her and want to know about her and realize you too can be a saint here. You know what I mean? We don't have to be some faraway land, some faraway time. I mean,
Right, and
that's
she
when my
faced
mom was alive.
yeah, exactly, and she faced so much adversity because she was also an immigrant to this country, so it's funny, she talks in her letters about learning English on some of the voyages and
Mm,
how one of her sisters would make sure to only speak to her in English so she could practice her vocabulary and what have you, and so she faced all of those challenges of having to assimilate to a new country and a new
gosh,
culture, and
yeah.
especially in the craziness of New York City, and to beyond these issues that everyone had to deal with, her position skyrocketing within the church and her ability to get things done on this global scale was really incredible when you think of what she
Yeah.
started.
Wow. It is impressive because I'm sitting here just starting my own business. It's taken me 10 years to really, get it going. And here she is building these missions, the seminaries, the convents. What did you say she's building around the world?
So these were mainly they were missions. So
Missions, yeah.
inclusive in the mission were predominantly schools, orphanages, and sometimes hospitals. And so really she was focused on not only the humanitarian aspect of this, but also on predominantly saving souls.
Saving
And
souls.
this is one aspect that I think the books will really help to supplement what the movie shows, because the from the movie you get a really good sense of her charity and humanitarian work for sure. There's a line and a scene where she gets an article into the New York Times to bring awareness to the conditions that the Italian immigrants are living in. And she says, rats have it better, which is just such a powerful image of how awful the conditions were
Wow.
for these poor immigrants. And she clearly made such an impact on the humanitarian scale. But her letters, especially, really drive home that her main goal was to provide for the eternal happiness of those that she served, because she knew that, this world passes away and that the soul is what matters. And she really wanted to make sure that not only did they have a good life while they were here, but that they made it to heaven ultimately. So, this is why the school, for example, was so important, because it provided this strong Catholic formation for the children so that they could grow
Mhm.
up to bring that and those values with them for the rest of their life, and to have that development of soul, so that when Mother Cabrini had passed away and her sisters had perhaps moved on, they would still have that gift of faith
Generations. That's
given
right.
them. Yes.
Did you have the privilege of going to a Catholic school?
I did. Yes, I went basically from preschool all the way through undergrad college. So I was quite
Wow. Did you
lucky.
have nuns?
I had two nuns that had kind of, I know I was at the tail end of that tradition, so only a few
Yeah,
left
it
over,
was
but
wonderful. I had nuns, and I still have the best memories of Sister Emily teaching me First Communion, Sister Elmira hiking up her habit and tying the rope and playing baseball with us and helping
oh,
us run the candy shop. And, I just remember things that they would tell us about God. Sister Emily said, when the host gets raised, you always say, my Lord and my God. And just those things, and you
that's so
see them
sweet.
in these habits, and you're like, okay, so such a power. There's something about the habit that it
Definitely.
changes you, and it does change souls because you see them as holy, you
And
know?
those who came in contact with Mother Cabrini definitely experienced this, because something I was a little bit surprised to read about was how respectfully she was treated by the first class passengers on these steamships.
Oh,
So
nice.
almost every single voyage, the captain himself invited her and her sisters to dinner with him, and just the highest honor on board. And then these very rich and, high echelons of society, many of whom were Protestants, so didn't even have a strong tie to the Catholic Church, but they would just be so moved by her presence and just this calm and beatific peace that she had about her, that they would be quite deferential and make all sorts of provisions to make sure that they were comfortable. So that was really beautiful
Wow.
to read, just the widespread cultural impact that she had.
One person, it's like a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, for
Wow.
sure.
Well, I'm excited because I have been looking for, and I'm not saying this just because you're on the air, right? But, I've been looking for something that just helps me kind of go forward. It's like, oh, do this novena, do this book, do this consecration. And I think as Catholics, we're bombarded with fantastic options. But
Right.
just to see a woman who is really relatively close to our generation, our country,
Mhm.
I'm going to enjoy reading I'm going to be enjoy reading it and applying it to my own life. Like, okay, here's the things I'm struggling with. So I
Right.
appreciate that.
Right. I know it's so hard to once you find a new favorite saint, it's like, oh, there's five others who you have to neglect at the same time, but
I know.
then the struggle. But it's really cool to see too that all of our favorite saints have their own favorite saints. So there's just this ripple effect from the beginning of the church. So Mother Cabrini, for example, took the name Saviero, or Xavier as her middle name, when she took her vows, which of course is in tribute to Saint Francis Xavier, who was a great missionary. And so she's constantly quoting him in her writings and using his missionary spirit to inspire her order. And then, of course, she also had this great personal devotion to the Sacred Heart. So a lot of her journal notes and retreat notes are full of these just very beautiful Sacred Heart prayers. And that's one that I think a lot of us can relate to.
Yeah. Well, then let's not forget the kids, because you and I mean, like I just said, Sister Emily, Sister Elmira, learning about the saints, and they were my favorite books in the library. As a matter of fact,
Oh, nice.
I could actually pull one out here.
Ah,
Back when I went to school in the 70s, they were giving away pretty much cheap the old books. And
okay.
back then they were old and yellowed from the
Nice.
30s and 40s.
Oh,
And I still saved them, and the covers are all bent. But it
love it.
was
That's
it
totally a
was
book
different
corner here.
saints in each book, and it was so the point of this is that children will drink that stuff up. I was just reading a
Mhm.
book today. I finished up a book by John Clark. It was called Betrayed Without a Kiss. It's powerful, and in it he talks about how um we need heroes, and there are heroes. He said there's plenty of
Mhm.
heroes. The world tries to say that there are none, but it's just
Mhm.
that we're looking at celebrities and movie stars. He said there's so many good heroes. Look at the saints. And it's just, we got to bring these out to our children. Go, look what this person did. Look what this person did. Anyway, I'm leading up to the children's book. So they too
Yeah.
can learn about St. Francis Cabrini, grow up one day and go, when I was a little child, I read this book. So
That's
what
right.
do we have for them?
Yes, so our final offering in this trifecta of Cabrini books is a picture book, and it's called Mother Cabrini, A Heart for the World. And it's just adorable. The illustrations are really well done, and of course boils down this story to something that is understandable for early readers, and then of course parents to read to their children as well.
Is it like a little book for like 3, 4, 5-year-olds that you read to them at night, or is it a book like your
Yes.
okay, so
Yeah,
it's
it's more
not
like your
like my
traditional picture book instead of an early grade reader.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so all of these books, we can get them if we go to, and I want to make sure I say it,
Yes,
sophiainstitute.com, because
that's
Sophia
right.
Institute's been really good to me. Every time there's a great book out there, I email. I'm like, can I talk to that person about that book? So that's how I got Kristen here. So please, if you do get the book, of course you can get it on Amazon or anything, but if you can, go to sophiainstitute.com. Let's kind of not give money to the big box stores and give them to the places that are really devoted to saving your soul. So is there really just sophiainstitute.com? I can put a link here to all three of the books in the show notes. That's
Yes, that'd
probably
be great.
easiest, isn't that?
Yeah, they're available right now, right on the homepage, since they're new releases. And I believe there are a few packages where you can buy
All
one
three
or
of
two
them.
or all three together.
Yeah, so guys, try to do that. And as always, give your kids the heroes. Try to give yourself the heroes. I think we have to start filling our brains with the stuff that's good. I don't know about you, Kristen, you're still young. But I turned off my television in January of 2020 or 21. It was just so
Oh.
nasty and vitriolic. The only time I'll turn on my TV now is if my husband and I are going to watch like a Milwaukee Brewers game or Little House on the Prairie reruns because I don't want
Oh,
anything that's
nice.
got horrible stuff in it. And my brain has been freed up, and so we'll ask for, if we do feel like watching a movie, a good Catholic movie. Sadly, it's like, Alexa, play a good Catholic movie. It's like this
Like what?
1947,
Yeah.
1952, 1800s. I'm like, oh my gosh, But this is go see the movie. But get these books because I think we need to keep on feeding ourselves, feeding our souls. And Mother Cabrini, she doesn't care about a penny you spend. She doesn't care if you read a thing about her life, but she does want you in heaven. And she died making sure that that's, what she could do is win souls. I think she'd be honored to know that God used her in the form of this movie and these books to continue her legacy of saving souls. What about you?
I
Do you think?
agree. Yes, she ultimately now she is proven to enjoy the beatific vision in heaven. So
Mm.
her greatest wish is that you go to heaven, which is just such a beautiful image that we can take of all the saints, that they really have our greatest good in mind.
Do you know how she died?
She died, I believe it was complications due to malaria, but it was an
Oops.
effect of this lifelong illness. And she died a few days before Christmas in 1917 while she was actually creating care packages for local children. So, die up until the very last moment of her life doing what she loved and fulfilling her vocation.
Oh, that's kind of like the way I'd like to go. It's like, okay, God, I may not have been good, but look, I'm dying doing stuff for you.
Yes,
Make that
exactly.
account when you're judging me, please.
It
Uh,
has to.
You've been such a pleasure to have on. I'm so grateful. Thank you for taking up
Oh,
this
thank you.
charge of getting this book together and editing this thing. And I know it
Absolutely.
changed you, and I do hope that other people are getting, one, two, or really all three of these books. Get your family to watch the movie and then hand them the books. Might be a good gift. I
Mhm.
know everybody says that. I hate sounding like a marketer, but again, I'm so Catholic now. It's like, let's get these things in people's hands so we can start reading the stuff. It's going to fill our minds with holiness and
Right.
not the yuck.
Confirmation season coming, first communion's coming.
True.
Maybe people will choose her as a confirmation saint with all of this new publicity, so who knows?
That is a good point. Yeah. Well, you're newlywed, so when you have your first kid, you got names to
There we
pick
go.
from
Gonna have to give a
the.
nod somewhere.
Although you work for Sophia Institutes, you've probably written about a lot of saints, so you're probably going to
I
have
know,
a lot to
there's a
pick.
long list.
And your husband's like, honey, whatever. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Oh, okay. So is there
Very
any last
fun.
thing that we need to say that we didn't cover? We told them where to go. We told them
Mhm.
about this amazing saint. Anything else that you think our viewers need to know?
Well, I think we covered it. I would just say, as you said, make sure to see the movie because, again, it is very difficult to find a movie that is not overtly hostile to Catholicism and
I know.
Christianity in general, but in fact actually glorifies one of our members and one of our saints. So that is a very positive development on the global scale. And then, of course, to delve deeper into Mother Cabrini's true identity and spiritual life and her role in bringing souls to heaven, you can do no better than to read about her life and to read her in her own words.
Yeah. When you read her biography, and her notes and things, did they already translate them to English in type for you, or did you get to see any handwriting? Did she write them in?
So all of the ones that I used ended up being previously translated because they had been compiled in an anthology, which is now in the
Mhm.
public domain. The letter, as for the letters in the 40s, but I did see online several excerpts of her handwriting, and of course it's beautiful because everyone had lovely handwriting in the
Back
20th
then?
century.
Did she write in English or Italian?
Both.
She
And
did.
so one source that I really wanted to use, we couldn't really get translated in time because this was such a short turnaround for this project, but that was one of her diaries that was still just in Italian. So
Oh,
there's new material out there that has yet to be fully explored. So
yeah.
for
Well, then when
me,
it's done, put it out there.
yes, exactly.
Because
We'll come to you next year.
I used to speak Italian because I lived there for 2 years,
Oh,
and I was pretty much close to being fluent. I was interpreting for everyone, but you lose stuff after 30 years.
for
But
sure.
to look at it and then still how the handwriting was so different too, I'd be going,
Yes,
what
I
are you gonna
know. Hey, maybe this can be a new project for you.
got it. Sophia Institute, hire me. Oh my
Thanks so
goodness.
much for having me, Christine. Always
Oh,
a pleasure.
you are welcome. You guys, please go to sophiainstitute.com. And like I say, anytime you're getting books, try not to go to the big box stores. Try to get them from these Catholic vendors, because they're just trying their best to win souls, as our mother was as well. It's sophiainstitute.com. The names of the 3 books are The World is Too Small, which is a reprinted biography of Mother Cabrini. It is the Mother Cabrini Companion. Did I say that right? That's all it's called. Mother Cabrini, can't even say it. Companion.
You got it.
Edited by Kristen Van Uden. Has it got your married name on it as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Theriault.
Mm-hmm.
I did it right. And then if for the child in your life, get the children's book. Again, I've read to my grandchildren saint stories, and they love them. They love the ones that have all the cool stuff in it. And if you forget all this, you can find it all right here in the show notes. Click on them and get the books that way. Go see the movie. And if you can, like and subscribe to my page, breakfastwithbacon.com. Like it here on YouTube, Rumble. Go to my website. I am starting to say to many people, and of course there's Facebook and Instagram too, is that for all those people that you love to follow, censorship is real, and our freedom of speech is already being curtailed. And so a lot of the things that we put out are not necessarily being sent to you anymore. So you may have to go directly to the websites of those people that you love. And I hope, with the guest God gives me, my show is one of those things. So breakfastwithbacon.com, sign up to get my newsletter. That'll help you get a link to shows like this right in there saying, here's the good things that God is doing. I think that's it. So follow me. Oh, and I just want to get a plug in for the Truth Speakers Conference that we're doing in October. We have powerful Catholic speakers at that one. Father Chris Alar is coming here to Virginia Beach. Christine Watkins, Daniel O'Connor, Mark Mallet, and myself will all be speaking at this conference at beautiful Virginia Beach. Go to truthspeakers.org. Oh, you forgot. It's also in the link below, so you can get it that way. I think I got it all covered. Oh, and that's October 12th. All right. Kristen, I think I told you how I go off the air. See how good my guests are. I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you to live your life
Sunny side up.
Oh.